What's going on YouTube? My name is Justin and welcome to another video. On Instagram I asked what kind of cooking videos you guys wanted to see, and overwhelmingly the majority was budget meals. And the budget was anywhere from about $4.99 to $9.99 per plate. Well, I've got one of my favorite spaghetti recipes that I've been making for a couple of years now, and it's only about $4 to $6 per person. So before we get into this, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Also, if you haven't, check out my Instagram. I'm posting there way more frequently than I ever have, and you're just gonna see small little recipes, whether it's smoothie bowls, maybe just like a breakfast. I'm just trying to post way more on there and get more interaction with you guys, the viewers. Before we get into this, I wanted to also say that there are a few ingredients that I have in this that are completely optional. One of them is red wine. You can get a cheap big bottle of red wine for about $8 to $10, and even this $4 to $6 per person price that I have for this 4 to 5 serving spaghetti, that includes the price of that $8 to $10 bottle of wine, so it's not even that expensive even getting it. Another optional thing is, say, basil. I like to put a few basil leaves into the sauce before I start to actually boil and simmer it during the cooking process. This just kind of helps infuse a little bit more flavor, and well, it's only like $2 for a bunch of basil. Another optional thing, and I personally really like it, but it's not a crowd favorite. Like, my girlfriend hates when I add this to the spaghetti, but my family loves it, and it's bacon. I love adding bacon and rendering out the bacon into the spaghetti. It adds a really nice porkiness to it. It's almost like a traditional meatball where you have the pork, the veal, and the beef, because we're also having ground beef in here. Just no veal, but you still get that porky flavor from the bacon, and getting a nice little bacon piece in your pasta, to me, is just really great. You don't need to have that, but again, it's only about $3 to $4 for an entire pack of thick cut bacon. So I say try it. If you don't like it, don't try it in the future. So the ingredients for this is a pound of just ground chuck, about 80-20. It's gonna run you about $4 to $5 for the pound. This pound of 80-20 was not even $4.50, not expensive. Freshly cut or chopped minced garlic. I think it's just way better. I do also add a little bit of garlic powder. I think it just helps to enforce that garlic flavor. Same thing with the onions. I have chopped onions here. It's half an onion for this recipe, but I also add a little bit of onion powder, again, to get a further kick of that onion. We're also adding crushed red pepper. I love crushed red pepper in spaghetti, but if you don't really like the heat that it might give, then add a little bit less, or maybe if you want more heat, add a little bit more, or just don't even add it in. And then my favorite tomato to make pasta with is San Marzano's crushed tomatoes. This can is a pound and 12 ounces, and then we're also going to have a splash of water. So now we're going to talk about the actual pasta that we're putting into this spaghetti, or that we're using for this spaghetti. The shelves are still pretty empty here in Michigan with the lockdown. Things are getting worse again, so the shelves are a little bit empty. Generally I would want to go for like a rigatoni, but penne works just as well. Rigatoni is a little bit wider, I like it a little bit more, but I want to go with something with a rigid texture because it helps hold the pasta on the outside of the noodle, as well as having a hole in there to actually get pasta inside of the noodle. I think it's just the best texture in all-around pasta when it comes to a nice spaghetti meat sauce. But it's subjective, so you do you. Now I want to make it clear at this point in making the sauce, I'm not actually seasoning the beef with anything other than salt. This is going on a pan, really hot. Well, not really hot, it's on a medium heat, but I don't want to burn anything that I could be putting on the meat, so I'm only adding salt at this point, and I'll tell you once we're going to start adding things like pepper. Not to mention, I'm only salting one side right now because I'm going to flip this side into the pan. For me, I don't like breaking up the beef. The important thing is we want to hard sear this almost like it's a steak, because you're going to get way more flavor out of the beef if you're searing the beef rather than breaking it up and just kind of like boiling it in its own fat. It's little techniques like this, by hard searing your beef for your spaghetti, that are going to help get out way more flavor from your food than you otherwise would have been. Those are kind of like little cooking tips or hacks when it comes to the home cook that doesn't really know a lot about cooking. Is just knowing a few little things to get more flavor out of your food is going to go a very long way. And like I said, just hard searing your beef before you break it up for a spaghetti is just going to get more flavor into your sauce, and just ultimately you're going to be happier with the end product. So now it's time to put in our beef. I'm just going to get a little bit of olive oil on the bottom, I'm gonna salt just one side of my beef. No pepper, just salt right now. And lay the salted side down. Again, this is going to help us form a hard crust on the beef, which is just going to get way more flavor out of the beef. Now that the beef is in, we can salt the other side. So now the thing about when we're searing this is we don't want to touch it. We want to just hard sear onto there. And we're not going to add anything to this pan until we flip it. Once we flip it, we're going to add the bacon that we have and start to render out the bacon while the other side is also forming a crust. It's also at this point, while you're waiting for the first side to form its crust, that you can actually start peppering the one side after you salted it. It's almost like making a giant burger patty in a sense, if you want to look at it that way. Alright, now we're going to flip it and get a sear on the other side. Now that we're starting to sear on the other side, we're going to add the bacon. I didn't get as much sear as I wanted, but it's still a great one. I'm going to separate this bacon just a little bit. So now once the second side gets a nice sear on it, that's where we're going to break it up. We're going to salt and pepper the inside of that beef. And we're also going to add just a touch of garlic powder, a touch of onion powder. And then once that starts to brown a little bit, we're going to add our onions, some red pepper flakes, and the minced garlic. Okay, so the other side is seared now, so now I'm just going to break it up, salt and pepper the inside, again a little bit of garlic powder and onion powder just to help reinforce the flavor of the fresh garlic and onion that we're putting into it. Okay, so now our beef is almost completely cooked through. It doesn't need to be perfectly cooked through, but the bacon is starting to render out. I'm going to let it go for just another maybe 2 minutes or so, but I'm also going to add now my red pepper flakes, just a few. Probably looks about like a pinch. You can add more, you can add less, and I'm actually going to add 2 pinches of red pepper flakes. It's also when we add our chopped onion. And our fresh garlic. Now we're just going to stir that around. Get everybody to know each other. And we don't want to establish much color on the onions. We're just trying to sweat them down and get them to soften a little bit without getting a ton of color on them. Now I'm going to let that go for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then I'm going to add a splash of red wine. I'm also going to add just a touch of salt to help salt the onions that are in. You don't want to add too much extra salt in here just because of the bacon, but if you're not adding the bacon, add a little bit of salt, salt it to your taste. Okay, so it's been about 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Now the onions are not really as white anymore. They're starting to get a little bit transparent, which means they're sweating out. They're getting to the point that I want them to be. They're not getting yellow at all. So now I'm going to add the red wine. I'm just adding a few splashes of the red wine, and my personal preference is to add the red wine before I add the tomato sauce. I kind of just like having that reassurance that the alcohol is being cooked out, and it's going to help deglaze anything that may be stuck to the pan. So I just like doing it now rather than later. And if you're going to serve this right away, because it does simmer for about 2 hours, that's my preferred time for it to simmer. So if you are going to try and eat this right away, you definitely want to make sure you're cooking out that alcohol. So like I said, this is, I don't even know how many ounces this is. 187 milliliters. I'm going to use about half of it in this. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of it. I don't drink alcohol. But yeah, I'm going to use about the half of that. I'm going to cook it out, and then I'm going to throw in the tomato sauce. There we go. Just going to mix that in. Also, because I know the question might come to your mind on what am I going to do with the grease that's on the bottom of the pan, and I'm leaving it in there. It's not the healthiest thing to leave in, but honestly it just keeps an amazing flavor inside of the sauce that I don't want to get rid of it, because this is just an intense amount of flavor sitting at the bottom of that pan inside of that grease that I don't want to discard. So we're going to keep it in, and it's just going to cook with the entire sauce, and you're going to eat it, and hopefully you're going to love it. Okay, so now this is what we're looking like. I'm just going to add the San Marzano crushed tomatoes and some basil, and I'm also going to add a little bit of salt and pepper just to kind of help season the sauce a little bit. Maybe a little bit of extra garlic powder and onion powder, and then just bring that to a boil and simmer it for about 2 hours. This is what we're looking like. You can see the basil leaves in there. So again, I'm going to bring this to a boil and then simmer it for about 2 hours, and I'll see you then. So it's important when you're going to be reducing a sauce for a while to add a little bit of extra water to the sauce to help it reduce out. The reason we're doing this is because you're adding extra moisture into there that's eventually going to evaporate out, and you're giving yourself a little bit of a buffer from just the moisture that's in it already. So just adding a little bit extra before you start to boil it and then eventually simmer it, and throughout the entire reduction process, adding a little bit of water if it starts to look a little dehydrated. And I see here I'm adding a little bit of butter to the sauce, and that's to bring together the fat and the water. The fat doesn't want to bind with the water, but when you add butter, it acts as almost a bridge between the fat and the water, and it actually brings them together quite cohesively. I also added a 1/4 cup of just your basic store brand Parmesan cheese, and then a 1/4 cup of the freshly chopped parsley. And then I'm just going to mix that in to combine, and you're pretty much ready to serve after you just kind of warm that through just a little bit until the butter is completely melted. And as you see here, I'm just adding a little bit more pepper because there wasn't just enough pepper for me. I like a little bit of extra pepper, so I added a little bit more. I tasted it and realized that I wanted more, and so I added it, and you should do the same. If you think you need more salt, add more salt. If you think you need more pepper, add more pepper. And you can see here, I'm just adding a little bit of that starchy water from my pasta water into the sauce. This is going to add a little bit of flavor as well as help to be a thickening agent in the sauce to get the sauce a little bit tighter. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out this video. If you liked this video and want to see more videos like this, please give this video a thumbs up and put your recommendations down in the description for other sort of budget meals you'd like to see, or just any sort of discussion you want to have with other people in the comments, including myself. Don't forget to hit the notification bell after you've subscribed, and again, head over to my Instagram. The link is down in the description below if you haven't already gone to my Instagram. And I guess with that, see you in the next one.